4 years ago, Dev Patel was in India scouting locations for his debut feature, Monkey Man. He'd been working on this project for years. It was announced in 2018 that he'd be directing it, and now he was full steam ahead into pre-production with his cinematographer. Except he was doing this at the start of 2020, right when COVID hit. And at the time, they didn't know quite how bad it was going to get, but eventually it became clear they had to get out of India. And after that, the entire world shut down, which meant so did the movie. As you can imagine, this was pretty devastating for Dev Patel. He'd been working on this project for years. He turned down some amazing parts, all because he had this dream of making this film. And now it seemed like the project was dead. This was already a low-budget film, and trying to do what they had planned on that budget was already going to be a huge challenge. So the idea of trying to continue making this film during the pandemic just seems impossible. And I think most people at this point would cut their losses and give up, and there'd be absolutely no shame in that. But Dev Patel would not let this dream die. So even with everything going on in the world, they tried to figure out, was there any way they could keep this project going? And they did. Filming in India became completely out of the question. But one producer knew of a tiny studio on an island off of Indonesia that they could potentially film from. Now, this was a massive change of plan. They had to basically scrap a lot of the work they'd already done, and Dev Patel straight up lied to his financier saying, yep, this place is exactly like India, this will be a perfect place to film. When really, it was just he knew it was going to be his only option to keep this project going. And they bought it. They moved the production to Indonesia. And this isn't what they had initially wanted or planned for, but it saved the film from getting canned. Yet, this was only the beginning of their production problems. So they started work in Indonesia, and every crew member, every cast member, even if they were only there for 3 days, they had to come 2 weeks early so that they could quarantine. But even with that, COVID meant they lost a lot of key production members. It was supposed to be shot by cinematographer Chung Hoon Chung, who shot Last Night in Soho, It, Old Boy, but he had to depart the project. They also lost their production designer, and they couldn't get enough actors either. They had to start pulling crew members, everyone from the lighting team to accountants, put them in costume and get them in front of the camera, because otherwise scenes would just look empty. They'd already lost people in pre-production, but once they started filming, their AD left, so they had no AD for a while. Then one day their camera broke, and if your camera breaks, you've no movie, you can't film anything. So they had to start filming things on GoPros and on their phones just to get the shots that they could. There was one scene where they were using a crane, and then the crane broke, so they had to make their own rig using a rope. Things just kept going wrong, things kept breaking, and there was just never enough people. The other factor in all of this, which just cannot be overstated enough, is the fact that Dev Patel was starring in this and directing this while it was his debut feature. Having to direct a feature is hard enough, especially when it's your first one, without having the pressure of having to star in it, let alone with COVID, let alone with it being a full-blown action film. I mean, just the physical and mental requirement of having to direct this film while also doing all these stunt scenes is just ridiculous, and also a massive risk. Because a big reason that actors have stunt doubles isn't because they couldn't do the stunts, it's because if your lead actor gets hurt, you are stuffed, you can't film anything more. And of course, during one of the fight scenes, Dev Patel broke his hand. Here he is talking about it.
I broke my hand straight away, blew up like an elephant's hand, and we carried on shooting. And the doctor's like, you cannot put any weight on this. You cannot do anything with this hand because there's a nail in there. And if it bends, you're never going to be able to move your hand again, because it's like pulling a bent nail out of wood. You're just going to wreck the wood. And we went straight back in the bathroom.
I mean, this is just a ridiculous amount of grit to keep this film going. But the financiers are looking at this news and going, there's no way they can keep supporting this. The lead actor is getting hurt, things keep going wrong. They're trying to make this in a bloody pandemic. There's just no way. And so they decide that it has to stop. They're going to pull the plug. Apparently producers were telling Dev Patel, like, look, it's fine, just come home. There's no point going on with this, and there's no shame in shutting it down. It's a crazy situation. But Dev Patel was like, nope, there is no way this is happening. He'd already had the film shut down before, and he was not going to let it happen again. So Dev Patel gets on a call with all the financiers, and he gives this really impassioned speech, and he's like, look, if this film shuts down, it's not just the movie going down, it's the 500 plus people who are employed to work in this who are now out of a job. This is keeping people employed, and it's giving them purpose during a really precarious time, and he thinks he can get the film finished. And somehow he convinces them to keep the film running, but they're gonna have to make cuts to do it. Patel said in his Reddit AMA, it got to a point where there was a producer using his own personal credit card to buy tabletops for the film. But against all the odds, filming completed in March of 2021, and even better, they got the film sold. Netflix bought it for $30 million, and when the budget was only $10 million, not a bad deal. And so the film was scheduled to be released in 2022, but if the film is only coming out now in 2024, what happened? Well, after the film had almost been shut down twice before, after they'd already completed filming, after they'd been bought by Netflix, the rug got pulled again. Netflix dropped the film, and they haven't given an official reason why, but there's theories. Now, all of this is murky, but The Wrap is reporting that, quote, political undertones may have spooked the streamer. And Deadline said that Netflix, after buying the movie, found it too gritty for the Indian market. From how I understand it, what that potentially means is that the film has a lot of elements that are quite critical of the right-wing BJP political party in India. And Netflix, who is expanding into the Indian market, didn't want to have anything that would potentially upset the Indian government. This whole process for Dev Patel must have been so frustrating, going through so much pain and suffering to get this film made, and then having the film just dropped by Netflix when he's so close to the finish line. And so the film was essentially on ice, and they hoped that they could take it out to festivals and maybe another buyer would pick it up. But before they even got to the festival circuit, by some miracle, Jordan Peele saw the film. He's the director of Get Out, Nope, and Us, and he loved it. And he convinced Universal to not only buy the film, but to give it a full theatrical release. This was a film that was essentially just shelved, and now Jordan Peele had saved it. And when it was released, it made $10 million on its opening weekend. That's its entire production budget in just one weekend. And if you've seen the film, you know it deserves it. It's damn good. And what's crazy is that if you hadn't heard about all the production problems, you'd have no idea from watching it that it had all these issues during the making of it. The film just works and it flows, and you never think about any of that stuff. And I'm just so glad to see this film do as well as it is and get the release it deserves. It was first announced that Dev Patel would be directing this back in 2018, and he went through a hellish time getting it to screens. So it's just kind of heartwarming to see that all of this hard work really paid off. There's this clip of him getting a standing ovation at the premiere at South by Southwest, and it's just really nice seeing how emotional he gets about it all. If you haven't seen Monkey Man, it's really worth your time, go see it. If you have seen it, let me know what you thought in the comments, and if you want to make sure you don't miss anything, hit subscribe.